Moonlight bleeds silver across Madrid's marble palace, May 1936. A scholar crumples, crimson blooming on starched collar, as the Star of Castile, diamond-crusted reliquary, blazes with cursed fire. One shot. Another. Two bodies clutch a secret older than Spain. Hidden passages sigh behind tapestries. Jasmine notes curl like incense from the dark. Hercule Poirot, ivory cane tapping stone, murmurs, "Faith forgives, stone remembers. Murder does both." Chapter 1. The Crimson Express. Hercule Poirot, standing upon the platform of the Gare de l'Est, regarded the Crimson Express with the satisfaction of a connoisseur appraising a rare vintage. The train was a masterpiece. Its carriages painted a deep, arterial red that caught the pale October light and flung it back like a challenge. Gold lettering along the side proclaimed its destination, Budapest via Vienne, in the confident script of the Compagnie Internationale des Wagons Lits. Porters in bottle green uniforms darted like swallows. The air carried the mingled scents of coal smoke, hot metal, and the faint, expensive perfume of the first-class passengers who were already ascending the little chromium steps. Poirot, small and compact, his patent leather shoes gleaming, his overcoat of the finest vicuña buttoned to precisely the correct degree, allowed a porter to relieve him of his valise. He retained only his Malacca cane with the gold band, and, of course, the small leather case that contained the essentials for the maintenance of his mustache. A man must have his priorities. The invitation to travel had come from the Comte de Villefort, who had telegraphed from Budapest. The Danube in autumn is a tonic for the soul. Come, mon cher Poirot, and leave the fogs of London behind. Poirot, who had just concluded a wearisome affair involving a diamond necklace and a clergyman's wife, required no second bidding. He had reserved compartment number 7 in the first-class sleeping car, a position he considered psychologically advantageous, neither too near the engine nor too far from the restaurant car. As the bell clanged for departure, Poirot mounted the steps. The conductor, a tall Frenchman with a mustache almost but not quite, the equal of Poirot's own, touched his cap. "Monsieur Poirot, your compartment is prepared. Allow me to show you." Pierre Michel, for such was the conductor's name, led the way along the narrow corridor, the train already beginning its imperceptible glide from the platform. The carpet was thick, the woodwork polished mahogany, the lamps shaded in rose silk. From the compartments came the rustle of silk dresses, the clink of glass, the low murmur of many tongues. Poirot's sharp ears distinguished English, French, Italian, and something that might have been Hungarian. Compartment 7 was perfection. A small sofa upholstered in crimson velvet, a folding table already laid with a lace cloth, a vase containing one impeccable white rose. Poirot tipped the porter, dismissed Michel with a courteous nod, and arranged his possessions with the precision of a drill sergeant. His dressing case went here, his copy of Balzac there, his gray suede gloves laid exactly parallel upon the rack. Only then did he permit himself a glance through the window. Paris slipped away, the gray roofs, the hurrying taxis, the Seine glinting like a dull blade. Ahead lay the long night journey across France, through the forests of the Vosges, into Austria, and finally to the Golden City on the Danube. Poirot rubbed his hands together with anticipation. Travel, he reflected, stimulated a little gray cells. At 7 o'clock, precisely, the restaurant car opened. Poirot, having changed into evening dress with the speed and neatness of long practice, made his way forward. The car was a vision of Edwardian splendor, small tables lit by pink-shaded lamps, silver gleaming, crystal sparkling, the steward in white gloves moving with the silent efficiency of a priest at the altar. Poirot was shown to a table for two near the center. His companion had not yet arrived. He studied the menu with approval. Consommé Olga, filet de sole Murat, tournedos Rossini, then allowed his gaze to travel over the other diners. At the table opposite sat an Englishman of military bearing, his face bronzed, his mustache clipped with regimental exactitude. He was deep in conversation with a young woman whose profile was pure and cool as a cameo. She wore a simple traveling dress of navy blue, but the string of pearls at her throat spoke of breeding. The Englishman addressed her as Miss Debenham. She replied in a voice of quiet decision. Further along, an American of gross proportions was holding forth to a nervous-looking secretary. The American's voice was loud, his gestures expansive. Diamonds flashed upon his pudgy fingers. "Ratchett's the name," he announced to the table at large. "Edward J. Ratchett, Chicago. Oil, railroads, you name it." His small eyes, set too close together, flickered restlessly about the car. At the end table, an Italian lady of mature years, dressed in black lace and wearing a quantity of rings, was being served with elaborate courtesy. Her dark eyes were tragic, her gestures theatrical. She sighed frequently and addressed remarks in liquid Italian to the window. Poirot's own table companion now arrived, a small, swarthy man with a neat beard, who introduced himself as Dr. Constantine, a Greek physician returning from a medical congress in Paris. They fell into agreeable conversation. The doctor was intelligent, observant, and possessed of a dry humor. Poirot found him sympathetic. The meal progressed. The sole was exquisite, the tournedos perfection. Poirot sipped his chambertin and listened. From the American's table came snatches of conversation, threats, vague allusions to enemies, the need for protection. Ratchett's secretary, a pale young man with a pinched face, murmured assent. The military, Englishman's voice cut across occasionally, clipped and precise. Miss Debenham said little, but her eyes missed nothing. Coffee was served. Poirot declined a liqueur, preferring a tisane. The Italian lady rose with a rustle of silk and swept from the car. Ratchett lumbered after her, mopping his forehead with a silk handkerchief. The Englishman and Miss Debenham lingered over their cigarettes. Poirot rose. "An excellent repast," he said to Dr. Constantine. "And interesting company. One feels already the currents beneath the surface." The doctor smiled. "You are observant, monsieur. This train, I think, carries more than ordinary passengers." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Precisely, and Hercule Poirot is never happier than when there is a problem to occupy the little gray cells." He bowed slightly and made his way back to his compartment. The train was rushing through the night now, the wheels beating a steady rhythm beneath his feet. In the corridor he passed the conductor, Michel, who touched his cap respectfully. "All is well, monsieur?" "All is perfection," Poirot replied. Yet as he prepared for bed, folding his clothes with meticulous care, a faint uneasiness stirred in his mind. The American's boastful voice echoed in his memory. "I've made enemies, but money buys protection." Enemies on a train? The idea was absurd, yet Poirot had learned never to disregard the absurd. He climbed into his berth, adjusted the reading lamp, and opened his Balzac. Outside, the night rushed past, dark and impenetrable. Somewhere ahead, the Crimson Express carried its freight of human passions towards Budapest, and perhaps towards destiny. Poirot switched off the light. In the darkness, the train's rhythm became a heartbeat. He slept, but lightly, as always when the little gray cells were on the alert. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Night. The Crimson Express had left the last lights of the French frontier behind and was plunging through the black pine forests of the Vosges. The hour was past midnight, and the train, though it thundered onward with the assurance of a well-bred animal, had settled into that peculiar hush that falls upon sleeping cars. The corridor lights were dimmed to a sullen amber. The only sounds were the regular clack of the wheels over the rails, and from time to time the faint creak of a berth as some passenger turned in uneasy slumber. Hercule Poirot, however, was not asleep. He lay on his back, hands folded beneath his head, eyes fixed upon the ceiling of compartment 7. The little detective possessed the gift, or the curse, of sleeping lightly, and tonight his mind was restless. The dinner in the restaurant car had been excellent, the company intriguing, yet a faint discord lingered, like a wrong note in an otherwise perfect symphony. The American Ratchet with his coarse voice and shifty eyes. The English girl, Miss Debenham, whose composure seemed a trifle too studied. The military gentleman, whose scar and clipped speech spoke of distant campaigns. Each was a piece in a puzzle whose shape Poirot could not yet discern. A bell tinkled sharply somewhere along the corridor. Poirot's head turned. The sound came again, insistent, agitated, from the direction of the sleeping cars. He sat up, reached for his dressing gown of quilted silk, and slipped his feet into morocco slippers. The bell ceased as abruptly as it had begun. Silence flowed back, thicker than before. Poirot opened his door a cautious inch. The corridor was empty, the amber lights throwing long shadows across the carpet. From the far end came the soft pad of footsteps. Michel, the conductor, hurrying towards the source of the summons. Poirot watched as the man paused before a compartment 3 doors down, Ratchet's, if memory served, and knocked softly. No answer. Michel knocked again, then produced his master key. The door opened, a murmur of voices too low for words, then the door closed once more. Michel reappeared, his face pale in the dim light, and hastened back towards the service compartment. Poirot stepped into the corridor, closing his door with the silence of a cat. He moved swiftly to Ratchet's compartment and laid his ear against the panel. Nothing. Not the faintest sound of breathing or movement. He tried the handle, locked from within. A faint smell of some heavy, cloying perfume hung in the air, mingled with another odor, metallic and unmistakable. Blood? Poirot's nostrils dilated. He rapped smartly upon the door. "Monsieur Ratchet, it is your neighbor, Poirot. Are you indisposed?" Silence. Then, from within, a low groan, animal, almost inhuman. Poirot's hand went to the master key he had observed Michel using, but at that moment the conductor himself reappeared, breathless. "Monsieur Poirot, you should not be here. Return to your compartment, I beg." "What has occurred?" Poirot's voice was crisp. Michel hesitated. "Monsieur Ratchet." He rang. He complained of an intruder. "I found the compartment empty, the window open, snow upon the floor. He was agitated. I gave him a sedative. He sleeps now. Yet you are disturbed, mon ami, and I smell blood." The conductor's eyes widened. "You are mistaken, monsieur. A nosebleed, perhaps. Please, return to your berth. The train is delayed by snow ahead. We shall not reach Vienna until late morning." Poirot allowed himself to be shepherded back to compartment 7, but his mind was racing. An intruder? On a moving train? The window open in this weather? He waited until Michael's footsteps had died away, then slipped out once more. This time he moved in the opposite direction, towards the rear of the car. The door to the next sleeping car stood ajar. Beyond it, the lights were even dimmer. A draft of icy air swept through. In the narrow space between the cars, where the bellows-like connection flexed with the train's motion, Poirot paused. Snowflakes whirled in through a gap in the canvas. Footprints? No, the metal platform was swept clean by the wind. Yet something caught his eye. A scrap of scarlet silk caught upon a bolt. He plucked it free, a fragment torn from a kimono, perhaps. The color was vivid, theatrical. He tucked it into his pocket. Returning to his compartment, Poirot did not undress. Instead, he sat upon the edge of his berth, watch in hand, and listened. The train labored upgrade now. The wheels screamed on the curves. At 1:17 a.m. precisely, he heard it, a woman's light step in the corridor, the rustle of silk, the soft click of a door closing. He opened his own door a fraction. A glimpse, a tall figure in a scarlet kimono, dark hair loose upon the shoulders, moving swiftly towards the rear. The woman paused before the door to the ladies' lavatory, glanced up and down the corridor, then vanished inside. Poirot waited. 5 minutes. 10. The woman did not re-emerge. At 1:33 a.m., another sound, muffled but unmistakable, a cry, cut off as though a hand had been clapped over the mouth. It came from Ratchet's compartment. Poirot was in the corridor in an instant. This time, he did not knock. He rapped out the international code for emergency upon Michel's door at the end of the car. The conductor appeared, tousled and alarmed. "Open Monsieur Ratchet's compartment, at once." Michel fumbled with the key. The door swung inward. The scene within was one Poirot would never forget. Ratchet lay half across his berth, the bedclothes drenched crimson. His pajamas were slashed in a dozen places. Blood had spurted in great arcs across the wall and ceiling. The man's eyes were open, staring in frozen agony. Upon the small table lay an open watch, stopped at 1:15. The window was wide, snow drifting in upon the sill, though the storm outside had moderated to a gentle fall. The air was thick with that same metallic smell, now overpowering. Michel staggered back. "Mon Dieu, he is dead, murdered." Poirot's voice cut like a whip. "Touch nothing. Rouse Dr. Constantine, quietly. And the other passengers must remain in their compartments, oars. The murderer is still aboard." While Michel hurried off, Poirot surveyed the compartment with the cool precision of a surgeon. The wounds, 12 in number, were of varying depth and angle. Some had been inflicted with savage force, penetrating to the heart. Others were mere scratches, as though the blade had been wielded by a child or a woman in hysteria. The weapon was nowhere to be seen. Upon the floor lay a man's handkerchief, fine lawn, embroidered with a delicate H. Beside it, a pipe cleaner twisted into a fantastic shape. And upon the table, half burnt in the ashtray, a scrap of paper bearing the words, "Daisy Armstrong," in a childish scrawl. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The Armstrong case, 5 years old, a sensation in America. The kidnapping of a child, the ransom paid, the little body found later in a wood. The mother, heavy with child, had died in premature labor. The father had shot himself. The gangster responsible, Cassetti, had fled to Europe with the ransom money. Ratchet. The name had rung no bell at dinner, but the face, coarse, predatory. Yes, it could be. Cassetti grown fat upon his crimes. Dr. Constantine arrived, dressing gown over pajamas, medical bag in hand. He bent over the body, his face grave. Dead 2 hours, perhaps less. The deepest wounds are to the left side. Right-handed assassin. But these superficial cuts. He indicated 3 shallow slashes upon the right arm. Almost as though a second person struck after the victim was already unconscious. Or, said Poirot softly, to suggest a second person. The doctor looked up sharply. You think? I think many things, doctor, but first we must examine the window. Together they leaned out into the night. The train was passing through a cutting. Snow lay deep upon the banks, unmarked by any footprint. The sill inside was dusted with snow, but the drift upon 5 upon the floor showed signs of having been disturbed, swept, perhaps, by a gloved hand. A button, brass, bearing the insignia of the Wagon Litz Company, lay half hidden beneath the berth. Poirot picked it up with a silk handkerchief. From a conductor's uniform, he murmured. Michel's, perhaps, or another's. Dr. Constantine shivered. The cold is bitter. Shall I close the window? No, leave all as it is. The Austrian police will wish to see. From the corridor came the sound of voices, passengers roused, questions sharp with alarm. Poirot stepped out to meet them. Colonel Arbuthnot, in a dressing gown of regimental scarlet, was demanding explanations. Miss Debenham, pale but composed, stood beside him. The Italian lady, Signora Rossi, clutched a rosary and wept theatrically. Mrs. Hubbard, the voluble American from the next compartment, was already in full flood. I locked that communicating door myself, I tell you, and yet someone was in my room. I felt the presence. I woke with a knife under my pillow. Here it is. She brandished a slender stiletto, its blade darkly stained. Poirot took it gingerly. The handle was of mother of pearl, the blade thin and deadly. It matched the deeper wounds exactly. Madame, he said with dangerous calm, you have tampered with evidence. I did no such thing. It was there when I woke. The little detective's eyes swept the group. 12 passengers, 12 wounds. The handkerchief, the pipe cleaner, the button, the burnt paper, the scarlet kimono, the stopped watch. And somewhere among these silent, watching faces, a murderer who believed the snow and the locked doors had sealed their secret. Poirot drew a deep breath. Mesdames et messieurs, we are many hours from Vienna. The line is blocked ahead. Until then, this train is a prison, and I, Hercule Poirot, am the warden. The murderer will not escape. Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft and relentless, covering the tracks behind them like a shroud. Chapter 3. The suspects assemble. Snow pressed against the windows of the restaurant car like a living thing, soft yet implacable, blotting out the world beyond. The Crimson Express had been brought to a halt in a siding near the Austrian frontier, the engine hissing gently as though exhausted by its struggle with the drifts. Telegraph wires were down. The nearest station, a hamlet called St. Pölten, could offer no assistance until the line was cleared. The passengers, roused from their berths in the small hours, now sat in attitudes of constrained alarm beneath the pink, shaded lamps. The tables had been pushed together to form a rough council chamber. Silver coffee pots and untouched croissants lent an air of grotesque domesticity to the scene. Hercule Poirot stood at the head of the improvised tribunal, small and erect, his morning coat impeccable despite the hour. His green eyes, bright as those of a cat, moved from face to face with the precision of a watchmaker examining the works of a delicate mechanism. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and incisive, "we are confronted by a crime of exceptional brutality. Monsieur Ratchet, or as I now believe, Cassetti, has been stabbed to death in his compartment. The wounds are 12 in number. The door was locked from within, the window open. No footprints mar the snow outside. The murderer is among us, and until the Austrian authorities arrive, it is my intention to discover the truth." A murmur rippled round the table. Colonel Arbuthnot, his face set like granite, was the first to speak. "Damned unpleasant business, but you're the fellow for it, Poirot. Heard of you in Simla. Still, the sooner the police take over, the better." Poirot inclined his head. "Your confidence is gratifying, mon colonel, but the police may be many hours delayed. Let us begin with the facts." He signaled to Pierre Michel, who stood pale and rigid by the service door. The conductor placed upon the table the objects found in the death compartment: the blood-stained handkerchief with its embroidered H, the twisted pipe cleaner, the brass button, the fragment of burnt paper, the stopped watch, and, finally, the stiletto produced by Mrs. Hubbard. "Observe," said Poirot, "the handkerchief is of fine lawn, clearly a lady's. The initial H suggests a Christian name, Helena, perhaps, or Hildegard. The pipe cleaner is bent into the shape of a noose, significant or merely the habit of a smoker. The button is from a conductor's uniform. The paper bears the words, Daisy Armstrong, the child murdered 5 years ago in America. The watch stopped at 1:15. And the knife—" He turned the stiletto so that the light caught the mother-of-pearl handle. "This is a woman's weapon, elegant yet deadly." Mrs. Hubbard, voluminous in a lilac dressing gown, gave a dramatic shudder. "I tell you, it was under my pillow when I woke. The communicating door between my compartment and his was bolted on my side. I bolted it myself. Yet someone came through in the night. I felt the presence, cold as the grave. Signora Rossi crossed herself and murmured a prayer. Miss Debenham sat very straight, her hands folded in her lap, her gray eyes fixed upon Poirot with cool intelligence. Dr. Constantine, who had resumed his place at the table, stroked his beard thoughtfully. Poirot addressed the conductor. "Michel, you were on duty last night. Give us your movements precisely." The man's Adam's apple worked. "I came on at 10 o'clock, monsieur. I made my rounds every hour. At midnight I passed along the corridor. Nothing unusual. At 1 o'clock, Monsieur Ratchet rang his bell. He was agitated, said someone had been in his compartment. I searched, found no one. The window was open, snow on the floor. I gave him a sedative from my emergency kit. He locked the door after me. That is all." "And you saw no one in the corridor?" Michel hesitated. "At about 1:15, yes. A woman in a scarlet kimono, passing from the direction of the lavatory towards the rear sleeping car. Tall, dark hair. I thought nothing of it. Passengers walk in their sleep sometimes." Poirot's gaze flicked to Signora Rossi. The Italian lady's rings flashed as she clasped her hands. "Not I, signore. My kimono is black, as you see. I slept heavily. My maid gave me a powder for the nerves." Miss Debenham spoke for the first time, her voice level. "I possess a scarlet kimono. It is in my suitcase, but I was in my berth all night. Colonel Arbuthnot can confirm that we said good night in the corridor at 11:30. The colonel gave a curt nod. Quite. Heard nothing until the hue and cry. Poirot turned to the handkerchief. Mademoiselle Debenham, your second name is Helena, I believe? She met his eyes steadily. It is, but that handkerchief is not mine. My initials are M.D., Mary Debenham, and I use linen, not lawn. Yet the monogram is H. Curious. Poirot laid the scrap aside. Now, the pipe cleaner. Colonel, you smoke a pipe? Never touch the things. Cigarettes only. Egyptian from Abdullah in Bond Street. Poirot's mustache twitched. Yet this cleaner was found beneath the body. And the button, Michel, your uniform? The conductor looked down in dismay. One is missing, yes, from the left cuff, but I swear I did not enter that compartment after giving the sedative. Dr. Constantine cleared his throat. If I may, monsieur, the wounds. I have made a more thorough examination. The deepest stabs are to the left side, inflicted by a right-handed person of some strength. But 3 of the shallower cuts are to the right arm and shoulder, and the angle suggests a left-handed assailant, or someone striking awkwardly across the body. It is almost as though 2 people, or one person wishing us to think so, Poirot finished softly. He moved to the window of the restaurant car. Outside, the snow had ceased. The world was a white immensity, broken only by the black ribbon of the railway line stretching east and west. No village was visible, no road, no sign of life. We are isolated, he said, turning back to the company. The murderer counted upon this storm, but Hercule Poirot is not so easily defeated. I shall now search every compartment, every piece of luggage. Michel, you will assist me. Dr. Constantine, you will remain here to ensure no one leaves this car. Mesdames et messieurs, you will oblige me by returning to your berths. I shall interview each of you in turn. There was a stir of protest, quickly stilled by the authority in Poirot's voice. One by one, the passengers filed out. Mrs. Hubbard was last, still clutching her smelling salts. You mark my words, Mr. Poirot, she declared. That Italian woman's at the bottom of it. All that sobbing and crossing herself, pure play-acting. Poirot bowed. We shall see, madame. We shall see. When the car was empty, save for the doctor and the conductor, Poirot allowed himself a small sigh. Come, my friends, let us begin with the compartment of the murdered man. There is much to learn, and the little gray cells must work quickly. As they moved towards the sleeping car, the train gave a sudden lurch. Somewhere ahead, the engine whistled mournfully. The Crimson Express was imprisoned in its white cage, and within it, the net was slowly, inexorably, tightening around the murderer. Chapter 4. Threads of the Past. The sleeping car corridor had never felt so narrow. Poirot, Dr. Constantine, and Pierre Michel moved in single file, the detective's Malacca cane tapping a measured rhythm against the carpet. The air was heavy with the mingled odors of blood, coal smoke, and the faint, acrid scent of fear. Compartment doors stood ajar. Passengers watched from within like wary animals at the mouths of their burrows. Poirot paused before Ratchet's door, now sealed with a strip of surgical tape, and produced a small notebook bound in green leather. First, he said, we reconstruct the night with precision. Michel, you will repeat your movements once more, but this time we shall walk them. The conductor swallowed. As you wish, monsieur. They began at the service compartment at the end of the car. Michel demonstrated how he had answered Ratchet's bell at 1 o'clock, how he had unlocked the door, found the American pacing in his pajamas, the window open, snow upon the floor. He was shaking, Michel said, kept saying, "Someone was here. I saw the shadow." I searched the berth, the lavatory, even under the bed. Nothing. I closed the window, gave him 2 tablets of Trianal from my kit. He locked the door after me. Poirot nodded. "And the communicating door to Madame Hubbard's compartment?" "Bolt on her side, monsieur. I checked it myself." They moved to Mrs. Hubbard's compartment. The American matron had returned to her berth and sat propped against pillows, a shawl about her shoulders, her face powdered, but her eyes red-rimmed. "I never touched that bolt after locking it at 11, she declared, and yet someone came through, someone with a knife. Poirot examined the bolt. It was stiff with new paint, but a faint scratch marred the brass where metal had scraped metal. "Tampered with," he murmured. "A thin blade, perhaps, or a strip of celluloid." He turned to the pillow. The indentation where the stiletto had lain was still visible. "And you woke at what hour, madame?" 2 o'clock, near enough. I felt the cold air on my face. The knife was there, under the pillow, point towards my throat. I screamed. Well, naturally I screamed. Dr. Constantine knelt to examine the communicating door from Ratchet's side. The bolt was undamaged, but a smear of blood, dried now to rust, marked the panel. "Someone opened this door after the murder," the doctor said. "To plant the knife?" "Or to create the illusion of entry from this side," Poirot replied. They passed on to Miss Debenham's compartment. The English girl had changed into a tailored traveling suit of gray tweed. Her suitcase lay open upon the berth, its contents arranged with military neatness. The scarlet kimono was folded atop a pile of lingerie. "You will permit?" Poirot asked. She inclined her head. He lifted the garment. The silk was heavy, the color of fresh blood. At the hem, a darker stain, 3 inches long, irregular. "Blood?" Dr. Constantine asked. Poirot sniffed delicately. "No, red wine, I think. Spilled at dinner, perhaps." He examined the lining. A small tear at the seam had been neatly mended with black thread. "And this tear? When did it occur, mademoiselle?" Miss Debenham's composure flickered. "Last week in Istanbul. My maid caught it on a nail." "Yet Michel saw a woman in a scarlet kimono at 1:15. You were awake?" "I was reading. I heard nothing." Colonel Arbuthnot's compartment yielded the pipe cleaner's twin, straight, unused, in a leather pouch beside a tin of Egyptian cigarettes. The colonel himself stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back. "Damned awkward," he said, "but I swear I never entered the fellow's room. Beastly business, the whole thing." Signora Rossi's compartment was a bower of black lace and religious medals. Her maid, a thin Italian girl, hovered anxiously. The widow herself lay upon the berth, a vinaigrette to her nose. "I am prostrated, signore. The shock, my heart." She pressed a hand to her bosom. "But I slept soundly. My maid gave me veronal." The maid nodded vigorously. "Si, signora." 2 tablets. She did not stir. Poirot's search revealed a small casket of jewels. Emeralds, diamonds, but no scarlet kimono, no bloodstains. Yet upon the dressing table lay a prayer card, its edge scorched as though held too near a flame. "Curious?" Poirot murmured. Dr. Constantine's compartment contained medical texts and a neatly folded white coat. The Greek doctor had little to add beyond his professional observations. They concluded with the luggage van. Trunks and valises were stacked in orderly rows. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he spotted a large American trunk labeled E.J. Ratchet in gilt letters. It was locked. "Michel, your keys." The conductor produced the master. The lock clicked open. Inside, suits of loud check, shirts with diamond studs, a wallet stuffed with banknotes, and wrapped in a silk handkerchief, a small automatic pistol. Ratchet feared for his life, Poirot said, yet he carried no knife for defense. Beneath the clothing lay a leather folder. Poirot opened it. Letters, threats, some typed, some scrawled in childish handwriting. "You will pay for Daisy." The Armstrongs remember. One was signed with a crude drawing of a noose. Dr. Constantine whistled. The Armstrong case. I read of it in the journals. The child was 3 years old. Poirot's face was grim. Cassetti kidnapped her, collected the ransom, then killed her anyway. The mother died in childbirth. The father shot himself. The maid, falsely accused, took her own life. A tragedy that touched many lives. They returned to the restaurant car, where the passengers had reassembled at Poirot's summons. The detective placed the letters upon the table. These were found in the murdered man's trunk. Someone aboard this train knew his true identity. Someone planned vengeance. Mrs. Hubbard gave a shriek. "I knew it. That Italian—" "Silence, madame." Poirot's voice cracked like a whip. "Let us consider the connections. Miss Debenham, you were governess in a house near the Armstrongs, were you not?" The girl's face drained of color. Yes. The child's nurse was a friend of mine." "Colonel Arbuthnot. The regiment of Colonel Armstrong, I believe." The soldier's jaw tightened. "Served under him in France. Fine man. Broke him that business. Signora Rossi, your sister was the Armstrong nursery maid who died?" The Italian woman's eyes filled with tears. "Si, my poor Paola. They said she stole the child. She jumped from a window. Michel, your daughter was a maid in the Armstrong household, accused of complicity?" The conductor's hands trembled. "She drowned herself in the lake. She was innocent." Dr. Constantine spoke quietly. "I attended Mrs. Armstrong in her confinement. The child was stillborn." Poirot's gaze swept the table. "And you, Mrs. Hubbard, you are Linda Arden, the actress, Daisy Armstrong's grandmother." The American woman's mask crumbled. She buried her face in her hands. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes. We all loved that child, and that monster destroyed us." The silence was absolute. Outside, the snow had begun to fall again, soft and relentless. Poirot's voice was gentle now. "You planned this together. 12 people, 12 wounds, a jury of the bereaved. But justice is not murder, mes amis, and Hercule Poirot does not permit murder to go unpunished." Colonel Arbuthnot stood. "Hang us if you must. We acted as one." The train gave a sudden jolt. Somewhere ahead, the engine whistled, a long, mournful sound. The net was drawn tight, and the little detective held the threads in his small, capable hands. Chapter 5. The web tightens. The restaurant car had become a court of judgment. The pink lamps cast a warm glow, but the faces around the table were cold as the snow pressing against the windows. The Crimson Express remained motionless in its white prison. The engine's occasional hiss sounded like a beast straining at a chain. Hercule Poirot stood at the head of the table, the green leather notebook open before him, a small silver pencil poised above the page. Every passenger was present, summoned by the conductor's urgent summons. Even the Italian maid had been brought from the second-class car, her eyes wide with terror. Poirot's voice, when he spoke, was quiet yet carried to the furthest corner. "Mesdames et messieurs, the hour of truth has arrived. The murder of Monsieur Ratchet, Cassetti, was no chance act of a lunatic. It was planned with care, executed with precision, and designed to appear the work of many hands. 12 stab wounds, 12 mourners for Daisy Armstrong, a jury of vengeance." He placed the blood-stained stiletto upon the table. The mother-of-pearl handle caught the light like a drop of frozen moonlight. "Let us begin with the weapon. It is a lady's knife, purchased in Istanbul 3 weeks ago. The shopkeeper remembers the purchaser, a tall woman in a scarlet kimono. Signora Rossi, you were in Istanbul?" The Italian widow's rings flashed as she clasped her hands. "I was, signore, but I bought no knife. My maid can testify. I purchased only lace and a rosary." The maid nodded frantically. "Si, signora, only the lace." Poirot turned to Miss Debenham. "And you, mademoiselle, were also in Istanbul, at the Tokatlian Hotel. You left on the same day as Signora Rossi." The English girl's composure did not waver. "I was traveling to my post in Baghdad. Our paths crossed no more." Poirot's eyes moved to the handkerchief. "This initial H. We have Helena, Miss Debenham's second name, but also Hildegard, the name of the Armstrong nurse who died. Signora Rossi, your sister's name was Paola, yet the family called her Hilda in affection." The widow's face crumpled. Yes, they did." Colonel Arbuthnot leaned forward. "See here, Poirot, this is all very clever, but where's your proof? A handkerchief, a button, a bit of burnt paper. Anyone could have planted them." "Precisely, mon colonel, and someone did. The pipe cleaner, yours, I think, but straightened and twisted into a noose to suggest your involvement. The button torn from Michel's cuff while he slept in the service compartment. The knife placed under Mrs. Hubbard's pillow after the murder, the communicating door forced from Ratchet's side." Mrs. Hubbard gave a theatrical gasp. "I knew it! That door was bolted. I bolted it myself." Poirot's gaze was gentle. "Madame, you are a great actress. Linda Arden, the toast of Broadway. You played Lady Macbeth in 1919. Your reviews spoke of a voice that could command armies. You commanded this one." The American woman's eyes flashed. "You dare accuse me?" "I accuse no one. Yet. I reconstruct. The plan was simple. Ratchet was lured aboard by forged letters. Here they are." He produced the threats from his pocket. "Typed on a machine in the American Express office in Paris. The handwriting of a child, Daisy's own, copied from her school books, preserved by her grandmother." Dr. Constantine's voice was grave. "The drug in Ratchet's glass, Trianol, but in massive dose. Michael gave 2 tablets, but the glass on the table held residue of at least 10. Enough to render him unconscious within minutes. Michel's face was ashen. I gave only 2, I swear it." "You did, mon ami, but someone entered later, through the communicating door, and forced the rest down his throat. The stopped watch, set back to 1:15 to confuse the time of death. The open window, the snow on the floor, staged after the murder, when the train had slowed in the cutting. No footprints because the murderer never left the train." Poirot's pencil moved swiftly across the page, sketching a timeline. 11:45 p.m. Ratchet retires. Michel locks his door. 12:15 a.m. Bell rings. Ratchet claims intruder. Michel finds nothing, gives sedative. 12:30 a.m. Communicating door forced. Ratchet drugged unconscious. 1 Hogox a.m. First stab wounds, deep, right-handed. Arbuthnot. 1:05 a.m. Second series, shallow, left-handed. Signora Rossi. 1 to 10 a.m. Window opened, snow scattered. Watch stopped. 1:15 a.m. Scarlet kimono seen, misdirection. 1:20 a.m. Knife planted in Mrs. Hubbard's compartment. 1:30 a.m. All returned to berths via rear sleeping car. He looked up. 12 people, 12 wounds. Some struck with force, some with hesitation to share the guilt equally. The evidence planted to confuse. The handkerchief in Debenham's drawer, the pipe cleaner beneath the colonel's berth, the button in Michael's pocket. Miss Debenham's voice was steady. And the motive? You said yourself Cassetti destroyed us all. Motive is not proof, mademoiselle, but the burnt paper, Daisy Armstrong, was not burnt in Ratchet's compartment. The ashtray held only cigarette ash. The paper was scorched elsewhere. Signora Rossi's prayer card, perhaps, held too close to a lamp. The fragment was planted after the murder. The Italian woman's hand went to her throat. You cannot prove... I can prove everything, Poirot said softly. The scarlet kimono, torn at the seam, mended with black thread. But the thread is silk, not cotton. Signora Rossi's maid uses only cotton. The tear was deliberate, to leave a fragment in the corridor. He produced the scrap of scarlet silk from his pocket. Found between the cars. The mend is fresh, done last night, in haste. The silence was absolute. Outside, the snow had ceased. The sky was the color of steel. Poirot closed his notebook. You planned it perfectly. Ratchet drugged, stabbed by each in turn. The scene staged to suggest multiple assailants or escape. But you forgot one thing. Hercule Poirot. The little gray cells do not sleep. Mrs. Hubbard, Linda Arden, rose slowly. Her voice, when she spoke, had lost its American twang. It was the voice of the tragedienne, rich and resonant. He destroyed my daughter, my granddaughter, my son-in-law. He destroyed 12 lives. We gave him 12 wounds. Justice, Monsieur Poirot, not murder. Colonel Arbuthnot stood beside her. We're ready to face the consequences, but we'll not hang separately. We acted as one. The train gave a sudden lurch. Far ahead, the engine whistled. 2 short blasts. The line was clearing. Poirot's face was inscrutable. The Austrian police will decide. But first, there is one more piece of evidence. He moved to the service table, where the coffee pots stood. From beneath a napkin, he produced a small glass vial. Empty, but bearing traces of white powder. Trional, he said. Enough to kill a horse. Found in the lining of Mrs. Hubbard's handbag, torn open in the struggle to force it down Ratchet's throat. The American woman's hand flew to her bag. That's not... It is, madame, and the fingerprints upon it are yours. The net was complete. The passengers sat frozen, 12 statues carved from ice. The Crimson Express stirred beneath them, gathering strength for the final run to Vienna. And in the restaurant car, the little detective with the egg-shaped head held their fates in his small, immaculate hands. Chapter 6. The Little Gray Cell's Triumph. The Crimson Express had begun to move. Snow slid from the windows in long, reluctant streaks as the engine, freed from its drift, gathered speed. The restaurant car swayed gently. The pink lamps trembled, throwing shadows that danced across the faces of the 12. No one spoke. The only sounds were the rhythmic clack of the wheels and the occasional hiss of steam from the locomotive far ahead. Hercule Poirot stood motionless, the empty vial of Trional between his fingers. He regarded it with the air of a conjurer who has produced the final rabbit. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said at last, "the case is complete. The murder of Cassetti was a masterpiece of planning. Yet, like all masterpieces, it contained the seed of its own betrayal. The little gray cells, they do not lie." He placed the vial upon the table beside the stiletto, the handkerchief, the pipe cleaner, the button, the burnt scrap of paper. The objects lay in a neat row, innocent in themselves, damning in their totality. Let us review the evidence one final time, with order and method. He raised a small manicured hand and began to count upon his fingers. Premier. The drug. 10 tablets of Trional, not 2. The glass upon Ratchet's table bore the fingerprints of Mrs. Hubbard, Linda Arden, whose handbag contained the vial. She entered through the communicating door at 12:30, forced the powder between his lips while he still drowsed from Michel's sedative. Mrs. Hubbard's head sank into her hands. A single sob escaped her. Deuxième. The wounds. The deep stabs, right-handed, powerful, delivered by Colonel Arbuthnot, who struck first to ensure death was swift. The shallow cuts, left-handed, hesitant, inflicted by Signora Rossi, whose grief outweighed her strength. Miss Debenham struck third, with the same knife, her hand steady from years of repressing emotion. Each of the 12 took their turn, passing the blade in silence, a macabre ritual. Colonel Arbuthnot's scar showed white against his tan. "We drew lots," he said quietly. "I won the right to strike first." Troisième, the staging. The watch stopped at 1:15, set back by Dr. Constantine, whose medical knowledge ensured the deception. The window opened, snow scattered. Michel's task, his conductor's button torn deliberately to cast suspicion upon himself. The scarlet kimono worn by the Italian maid, who walked the corridor at the appointed minute, to be seen and remembered. The maid gave a little cry and buried her face in her apron. Quatrième. The planted clues. The handkerchief, Miss Debenham's, monogrammed H for Helena, placed by Signora Rossi. The pipe cleaner twisted into a noose and dropped beneath the berth by Mrs. Hubbard. The burnt paper, prepared in advance by Dr. Constantine, using a prayer card scorched at the edge. All designed to confuse, to suggest a dozen separate murderers where there was but one conspiracy. Poirot's voice softened. "You were clever, mes amis. You counted upon the storm, the isolation, the locked doors. You believed that 12 wounds would point to 12 hands, and that no jury would convict the bereaved. But you forgot that Hercule Poirot travels upon this train." He turned to the window. Vienna was near. The spires of the city pricked the horizon like black needles against the clearing sky. "And now," he said, "the Austrian police await us. They will find a murderer, or murderers, already confessed. The evidence is irrefutable." Miss Debenham raised her head. Her eyes were bright, almost feverish. "Will they hang us, Monsieur Poirot?" The little detective's face was grave. "The law is the law, mademoiselle, but the law is not always justice." A silence fell, deeper than before. The train rounded a curve. Sunlight struck the windows, turning the snowfields to blinding white. Poirot gathered the exhibits into a small leather case. He snapped it shut with a decisive click. "There is, however, one possibility," he said slowly. "A possibility that the Austrian authorities might accept an alternative explanation." He moved to the service table and poured a glass of water from the carafe. Into it he dropped a single white tablet, Trianol, taken from Michel's emergency kit. Suppose, he continued, that Cassetti, tormented by remorse, took his own life. Suppose that in delirium from the drug, he inflicted the wounds upon himself. Some deep, some shallow, as a man in frenzy might. The communicating door forced from his side in his struggles. The knife, his own, he carried it for protection, wrapped in the silk handkerchief. The window opened by his dying hand, seeking air. Dr. Constantine's eyes widened. Medically, it is possible. Contortions of the body, the varying angles. Precisely, doctor. And the planted evidence? The work of a madman, scattering objects in his final moments. The burnt paper, his own confession, half destroyed in regret. Colonel Arbuthnot stared. You would lie for us? Poirot's mustache bristled. I would speak the truth, as it might be interpreted. The wounds are compatible, the drug residue in the glass, the absence of footprints, the locked door, all fits the theory of suicide. Mrs. Hubbard, Linda Arden, lifted her head. Tears streaked her powder. Why, Monsieur Poirot, after all we have done? Because, said Poirot simply, there are times when the law is too blunt an instrument. You took justice into your own hands, yes, but Cassetti had escaped human justice for 5 years, and Hercule Poirot is not without compassion. He turned to the company. The decision is yours. Confess to murder and face the rope. 12 ropes, perhaps. Or accept this version and walk free in Vienna. The choice must be unanimous. The silence stretched. Then, one by one, they nodded. Signora Rossi crossed herself. Miss Debenham's hand found the colonel's. Michel wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Poirot addressed the conductor. Michel, you will inform the Austrian police that Monsieur Ratchet committed suicide in a fit of remorse. Dr. Constantine will sign the medical report. The rest of you will say nothing. Ever. The train slowed as it approached the Westbahnhof. Porters in blue uniforms waited upon the platform. Policemen in green stood at attention. Poirot gathered his case and his cane. Come, my friends, the comedy is ended. As they descended the steps, the 12 walked separately, yet bound by an invisible thread. Poirot watched them disperse into the Viennese crowd. Arbuthnot, stiff-backed, Debenham pale, but composed, Mrs. Hubbard clutching her handbag as though it held the secrets of the world. He adjusted his hat, smoothed his mustache, and murmured to the empty air, order and method always, and sometimes, mes amis, a little mercy. The Crimson Express, its scarlet carriages gleaming in the winter sun, stood empty upon the siding. The snow had melted from its roof. Only a few flakes lingered in the shadows, soon to vanish. Poirot turned away. Somewhere in the city, a church bell tolled the hour. He walked towards it, his footsteps light upon the cobblestones, the little gray cells at peace.